debate in Congress whatsoever. Obama just declared this to be the new normal in February of 2009, and everybody just said, "Oh yeah, okay." And so it all, all of this stuff kind of becomes a regular element now of what the Obama administration accepts as the cause for war and the cause for kind of Justice Department level surveillance. It's not, of course, just the White House that can be crazy all the time. Congress can sometimes be quite crazy in its own right, as we've seen this week, and I'm really glad Chris has been, and others have been doing so much work to push this NDAA thing, because the intent was never to, let's make this law to arrest everybody with Occupy. The intent was really to play a macho game about the issue of how we prosecute detainees, because they were going to take everybody and get them out and put them in military tribunals, and then they were trying for a while to do court suits, and a lot of the cities like New York didn't want them, but then a lot of members of Congress started saying, well, it's not macho enough to try them in civilian court. We got to try all those bad guys in military tribunals. And so then they started looking at the law and saying, well, the military can arrest U.S. citizens in other nations if they're near an area of combat. And the military can arrest aliens here in the United States. But the military is not allowed to arrest U.S. citizens and detain them for some indefinite period of time within the United States borders. And so basically it became a macho issue between the Democrats and Republicans to try to kind of fill in this gap and close this gap, as it were. And a lot of people think that the hidden motivation behind this is that the Justice Department wants to jump fast on a whole bunch of U.S.-born Somali teenagers in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota, some of whom have been flying to Yemen, and becoming members of Al-Shabaab. And they think that there's this huge, vast teenage Somali conspiracy in the northern Midwest. And so there's talk that there's going to be some coming crackdown. And the reason Obama's been kind of nervous about this is because he really would just assume that normal law enforcement be the ones responsible for this. But Congress says, no, it looks so much cooler if we get the military to do it. And then they could just kind of throw Somalis somewhere through a domestic extraordinary rendition, and we'll hide them somewhere where they'll never be found again. And so, whether they get away with it, at this point, I have no guess as to whether this really will pass Congress in the form it's in, and whether, Obama will follow through in vetoing it, or whether he will cave in once again. I don't think any of those kind of federal things represent real threats to Occupy. What I think you have to keep watching is more this assumption of militarization by local police forces and state police forces, not just the kind of riot gear stuff that's in that New York Times display a few days ago, but also this military pass-through program that's going to put drones and tanks. There were some pictures in something I was handing around of Tampa has tanks now in the Tampa police force, real tanks, not armored personnel carriers. And more, police forces, we've seen those pictures, CSPD too. This is becoming the new norm. And that's going to be the kind of thing we have to watch for. And I think that, probably I just conclude by saying the ways in which you can kind of really respond to all this. I mean, just kind of the overall lessons for activists is number one, be just as open as possible and kind as possible, and not looking for those times when you can ratchet up confrontation either with your allies or with the police. That doesn't mean you should be ever frightened of the police. If you have a set goal of wanting to be arrested, that's a great thing. Civil disobedience is a great thing, and it should be done. But it should be done with this attitude that I think a lot of people do take, that the police are part of the 99%. If there's a way to reach them, you can do so, and it benefits everybody that way. And I think that it doesn't do us a whole lot of good to always be going back and forth, who's the police agent, who isn't? You just follow your own rules. If you're doing CD, you'll probably talk to the police. That's something you'll do. If you're reporting actively to the police about what's going on, that's probably a bad thing to do. But it doesn't mean that the person, it's kind of like people are learning as they go along, and these are the kind of lessons you learn and the kind of things that are done. But then another lesson to take is to try to be as transparent and open in your personas as possible across all social environments. And the way to practice that, I think, I always laugh, Google Plus does exactly the wrong thing because it creates circles. And your work persona is totally different from your personal persona, all that. The more you have skeletons in your closet and different personas for different circumstances, the more police agents can take advantage of you. If you are as open as possible and you are the same person for all your Facebook friends and all your Twitter environments and everything, then you become kind of bulletproof in the sense that who you are is what you are right up front. I should probably mention something about social networks before we close too, is that the odd thing about, you probably many of you have thought about this before, by heavy use of Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, everything else, you become your own best intelligence agent. And it's become so outrageous that the NSA and NRO have actually called for slight budget cuts from their collection things because they don't need them anymore, because they have these open source centers where they study everything on Twitter and Facebook. And so, to me, that doesn't say, oh, I should never join Facebook, I should be paranoid about every public persona. It just means, who I am is who I am. What you see is what you get. You know, this is what I've declared my interest to be. And I will tell that to my Tea Party friends, and my anarchist friends, and my police friends, and they'll all get the same story. And to me, that makes things bulletproof, and it makes the existence of social networks a non-issue, because, hey, if NSA is learning about me through Twitter or through big satellites in the sky, it's irrelevant. All they have to do is ask. And I think maybe that's kind of the closing remark. If we're personally, I believe in nonviolence principles. I think, keeping nonviolence, keeping open, keeping frank, and kind of happy and kind is just a real powerful weapon to use against people dressed up in big turtle suits who might have tanks on the streets of Colorado. And so that's all my, prepared remarks or whatever. So if anybody has any questions or anything, yeah.
Holder does not seem to have much interest in the espionage activities of the Zionist entity in this country. For example, here in Colorado Springs, they operate so bloody openly.
If you're an ally,
no.
Like, yeah.
Everything from Israeli art students and their Dead Sea cosmetics. Remember that at Citadel Mall. Right down to the infiltration of religious bodies.
Sure.
I mean, they're all over the bloody place here. And
because Obama already knows he's considered an enemy of Israel, and so he wants to bow to AIPAC as much as possible. I mean, Lamborn spent last week touring illegal settlements and just loved it.
AIPAC was one of the forces that put him in power. We know that. But the openness with which they operate here, and you consider, Arab terrorists? Well, I don't know too many. I know Arabs that, that sell heroes and Turkish coffee, but I don't think that they're really involved.
I know a lot of white Americans who, if it's money, they're all gung-ho for Lowe's hardware and the whole thing with that, because they say if it's a Muslim, they must be a terrorist, and they do not distinguish.
No, not at all.
And that's a lot of Americans that think that.
Not at all.
Sad thing. I think while Joel was here, go ahead.
If anybody needs a job, there's a giant billboard on South 25 right after Academy. They're hiring in Lubbock, Texas for civilian detainee officers. And they have a nice giant cop posted on there dressed in the military outfit holding AK-47.
And there's always openings at Schriever and Buckley and all those things.
Well, and that's been one of the things that we have seen also has also been increases in advertisements for internment and detention specialists as well. And so there does seem to be a certain ratcheting up in terms of trying to get the actual camps that were originally put for ICE, but having people in line to actually staff those camps from an operations standpoint, meaning the people that do the laundry, that cook the food and everything, etc., ready to go supposedly on a 72-hour notice as they're moving forward with that. That actually supposedly that process started as of December 9th, which was relatively recently. And so as we do look at this, I mean, excellent suggestions, but you do have to assume there is absolutely no such thing as privacy. I have a couple of buddies that work for a local security firm. They're ex-intelligence, and they could, have anecdotally something that, dude, we can drive by your house with a van, turn on your hard drive, and basically absorb everything in your hard drive, and you do not even wake up. You don't even have to go in the house to do a sneak attack. So just be aware and assume that at any given time, every single text, every single phone call, every single email, whether you send it or not, or whether it's a statement on Facebook that you delete, does go somewhere. Now, that doesn't mean that there's somebody that's looking at it right now. That does mean that if somebody's like, hey, I'm wondering what email that was between Oz and Joel on October 18th at 4 p.m., let's go back and see those emails. It is somewhere there where they can go back and pull that stuff up. So yeah, just assume there's absolutely no such thing as privacy. But with that being the case, you do know then that you can tailor and mold your persona to be essentially what it should be, which is basically something that's just using their voice to try to activate their community. And therefore, make sure that in fact, not necessarily harmless, but we are obeying the law, we are being peaceful. And then B, you also make sure that everybody else knows that too, so that if you do go missing one day, people know that it's probably not because you're trying to blow something up.
Yeah. Lori, do you have anything to say about biological agents on drones? I mean, is there some story about the drone that was captured by Iran? Are they asserting that they found biological agents on it? Or is that...
I have not seen the Iranian government officially say so. And the problem you run into there is that they were performing cross-border surveillance. My bet is that they would be very worried about introducing any kind of weapons on board for reasons of diplomacy. It's like the whole U-2 scandal. It certainly is like a version of the U-2 scandal. But you want to keep it surveillance related because otherwise the shit would totally hit the fan. But I don't see it outside the realm of possibility. I just think they would probably want to avoid it. But certainly, you can put anything on a drone. Rumsfeld really wanted to build nuclear drones, nuclear armed drones, not nuclear powered, but nuclear, with small tactical nuclear weapons. And the only thing that prevented was just people saying, "That's freaking nuts," But it's Hellfire missiles, small cluster bombs, biological agents, anything. No reason not to.
Just had a question. You mentioned the Attorney General has the right to MI at any time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is supposedly one of the titles of Patriot Act, but the degree to which I would think that he can virtually ask for anything from the Office of National Intelligence, the NSA, or NRO director. I mean, probably there's a few limits to it, but I think he could probably ask for anything at this point.
Do you know of any 1033 agreement here in Colorado Springs, any ordinance that's shipped here?
No, I mean, we've got those pictures of the one thing, and I would imagine that came from... I would imagine that came from Justice Department budgets, because when you're talking about real military materiel, it would probably be a lot bigger and heavier, but not necessarily.
Of that at Fort Collins.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Look at the little green Jeeps. There's so many that have things around. They could declare 20 of those as surplus. It could be a tactical SWAT team.
Well, Stevens Point, Wisconsin, the military gave them a tank.
Yes.
And there's like a total of, 400 people in that town?
Yeah.
400 people?
Well, and that's the thing. See, a lot of this isn't judged on the basis of how many people are there or what kind of insurgency problem they have. It's like doling out the candy, and it's like, if you got 20,000, population, hey, why not, get something? But you made a really good point there about this whole situation of people talking about, armed revolt. It's a nice thing to talk about, la la la, but it's like, it's never worked in this country since the original revolution. And the problem is, you take the Randy Weaver case, the right-wing autonomist, from back in 1990 or whenever that is. Once you've declared yourself autonomous and armed from the U.S. government, you should expect to have cruise missiles, drones, tanks, and even small nuclear weapons, arrayed against you because you have just, in effect, declared war against a massive military power, and that military power is not necessarily going to see anything as off the table. So, I mean, that kind of shows the absurdity of talking about armed revolt when living in a gargantuan superpower like this one, because there just is no